Tractate Chagigah discusses the laws of the special holiday offerings, called the Korban Chagigah, which was brought to the temple in Jerusalem on the 3 pilgrimage holidays, Passover, Shavuos, and Sukkot. The first chapter begins the discussion of these laws. The Mishnah says, everyone is obligated to appear in the temple courtyard on these holidays, besides for a deaf, mute, an insane person, a minor, a person of undetermined sex, a hermaphrodite, woman, unfreed slaves, the lame, the blind, the infirm, the old, and someone who can't go by foot. The minor, which is exempt, is one who cannot ride on his father's shoulders to go up to the temple mount, according to Beis Shammai. Beis Hillel says it's a child who can't hold his father's hand to go up the temple mount. Beis Shammai says the Ola Re'iyah, the offering of you appearing there, must be worth at least 2 silver ma'os, and the Shalmei Chagigah, the peace offering for the holiday, must be worth at least 1 silver ma'ah. Beis Hillel says the coin amounts are switched. The Gemara says, when it said all are obligated to do this, what exactly does this include? We bring a few suggestions, but we say it's even a person who's blind in one eye, or possibly even a half-slave, which is discussed. It also says the deaf-mute in question here is one who is not mentally competent, similar to an insane person or a minor. It's also someone who can't hear or speak. If you can do either, you're obligated to go. We bring sources, and this is further discussed. It brings some verses on this, and it says, in regards to the Hakel gathering obligation, that it would make even an only deaf or an only mute individual be exempt based on the verse, so that they will hear and so that they will learn. But it brings an instance of 2 mutes who attended the study hall, and they were very capable learners, so actually it means so that they will teach, which a mute person can't really do. And it brings proofs for this interpretation. It also says, based on the verse, so that they will hear, that someone deaf in one ear is exempt from appearing in the temple courtyard by the holiday pilgrimages. Based on another verse, it also exempts someone who's lame in one foot. There are further points discussed. There are related topics mentioned, and it discusses what degree of insanity we're referring to. Some say it's a person who goes out alone at night, someone who lodges in a cemetery, and someone who tears his garment for no reason. Some say it's somebody who does all of these. Some say it's even someone who does one of them. This is further qualified. Some say it's someone who destroys everything he's given, and it's unresolved if that applies here. Women are exempt, as they're exempt from all time-bound positive commandments, unlike their unique obligation by the Hakel gathering. It also says how the verse implies that a person of undetermined sex, a tumtum, or a hermaphrodite, an androgynous, are exempt from this. The other exemptions are also qualified. It also says exempt from the Olas Re'iyah offering are the uncircumcised and the ritually impure. We bring sources which are discussed, along with a brief thing on how the angel of death takes souls. There are other verses discussed along with the remaining points. There are even further verses and incidents in regards to the importance of studying Torah, staying away from transgression, and similar. It also qualifies the argument about which minor is exempt from these obligations. It discusses a lame or blind minor who will be healed before adulthood, and it says that such a person would not be biblically obligated as an adult, so a minor with such a situation is not obligated rabbinically, which is a general rule. It also explains the dispute in regards to the worth of the offerings. Beis Shammai would say the Re'iyah is greater, as it's offered entirely to God, and there's more of this type by the Shavuos offering, while Beis Hillel would say the Chagigah offering is greater, as it was brought before Mount Sinai, and there are more of this type by the Prince offerings. Beis Hillel would argue with Beis Shammai, as he could say that the Chagigah offering is superior, as it has 2 consumptions on the altar and by people, and we can't compare the Re'iyah offering to Shavuos, as that's a communal offering, while the Re'iyah is an individual offering. Beis Shammai would argue saying that the Re'iyah was also brought before Mount Sinai, and it's not comparable to the Prince offerings, as those weren't done generationally. This is further discussed. This topic is argued on further for a bit, and there's further definition given to the practice of these offerings. New Mishnah. The Ola offering brought on the intermediate days of the holiday must come from unconsecrated property, but the Shalomim offering must come from Ma'aser Sheni tithes. The Chagigah offering brought on the first day of Passover, Beis Shammai says it must come from unconsecrated property. Beis Hillel says it can come from Ma'aser Sheni tithes. There is an obligation to rejoice on holidays, which meant to eat meat from offerings. Yisraelim, non-Kohanim, and Leviim can fulfill their obligation with voluntary vow offerings and from the animal tithe, while Kohanim can eat chatas and asham offerings, the firstborn offering, and parts of the shalomim offering. They cannot fulfill this obligation with bird or mincha flour offerings. The Gemara clarifies these points. It also speaks on the Chagigah offering brought on the 14th of Nisan by Passover can be purchased with Ma'aser Sheni funds, as it's not biblical. The other opinions are discussed and defined. There's more discussion on some related verses. New Mishnah. If a person has many household members who want to participate in the Chagigah offering, but few possessions, he should bring lots of Chagigah offerings and less Olas Re'iyah offerings. Someone with many possessions but few of such household members should bring lots of Olas offerings and less of the Chagigah Shalomim offerings. The minimum pricing amounts specified earlier apply if you have both. The Gemara says, if he doesn't have possessions, he can use mais or sheni money and bring a large bowl. There are further particular cases discussed. It gets into someone who has remaining sacrifices from a bunch which were designated, and he wants to bring them on the second day. It's permitted only if he specifically said that they would be offered on the first day, and it would also not be allowed if there was still time to bring them on the first day, but he just chose not to. New Mishnah. Someone who did not offer the Chagigah offering on the first days of the holiday of Sukkot, or any holiday, he can bring it on any other day throughout the holiday. If the holiday ended without bringing it, he can't do it any longer. As the verse says, a crooked thing cannot be made straightened. Some other examples of such a concept: someone who has a bastard child with someone he couldn't have relations with, which can't be repaired, unlike stealing, which can be repaid. Some say this refers to a Torah scholar who forsakes the Torah. The Gemara cites sources for these points, and they're discussed. This is all qualified further, and it speaks on the points of the importance of studying Torah. New Mishnah. The laws of being released from vows don't have scriptural source, and are taught from the oral tradition, as are the laws of Shabbos, the Chagigah offering, and Me'ilah, the prohibition against using consecrated objects. By those, they have a few verses referencing them, and from them there are hundreds of laws derived. Monetary laws, sacrificial service laws, purity laws, and laws of illicit relations have proper scriptural support and are fundamentals of Torah. The Gemara brings and discusses the verses which are these reference sources. It also lists the ones for the Chagigah and the Me'ilah concepts. The remaining points are further qualified. It also clarifies that all of these laws are fundamentals of Torah. And that's the end of Chapter 1. Chapter 2 of Tractate Chagigah continues on the topic of holiday offerings, starting with some points on teaching certain laws. The Mishnah says the laws of forbidden unions can't be taught with 3 or more people, the accounting of the creation can't be taught between 2 or more people, and the accounting of the Ma'aseh Merkava, the miraculous vision of the chariot, to one person, unless he's scholarly enough to figure out the understanding on his own. It also says there are 4 things that, if scrutinized, it'd be better if he had not been created. What is above, what is below, what was before, and what is after. Also, someone who has no honor for his creator. The Gemara explains that it means that the laws of forbidden unions shouldn't be taught to 3 other people. The creation to 2 people, and Ma'aser Merkava to 1 person. The verses which imply these are quoted and explained. The issue with 3 people learning is that 2 might start chatting privately and then mess up the laws, as this is a topic which people have an intense urge to do. The verse for not teaching creation to 2 people is cited, and it explains many points on this. It says that Adam was originally made from the earth to the sky, but was shrunk when he sinned. There are further points on this, and it says that there were 10 things created on the first day: the heaven, the earth, tohu and vohu, which will be defined, light and dark, breath and water, the length of the day and of the night. All the verses which imply these are listed. Tohu is said to be a line that encircles the world, which darkness comes from, and vohu is the stones of the deep, that water comes from. It also says that the light created on this day was so bright that everyone could see across the world, but it was hidden after the flood. It also says that the world was created with 10 things, and it essentially lists the 10 sephiros, the 10 expressions, essentially, each of which refer to a different concept. There are verses, and further points on the creation of the world. There's debate as to the heavens. Some say there are 2, based on a verse. Some say there's 7, and it's said to refer to astronomical layers. They're all defined, and what goes on in each one of them. For instance, the highest has righteousness, charity, and justice. The souls of the righteous, the spirits of those that will be created, the dew, which will be used to resurrect the dead, and others. It also speaks on not transmitting secrets of Torah, like the accounting of creation and the Ma'aseh Merkava, to people unless they're respected, a teacher of the wise, a comprehender of mysteries, and others. One sage is even of the opinion that you shouldn't go and teach Torah to a person who worships idols. There's points on the teaching of the Ma'aseh Merkava, and how the book of Yechezkel was almost not canonized due to apparent contradictions until a sage went through the whole thing and clarified everything. These points are further discussed, going through the verses and points and explanations on the Ma'aseh Merkava. There are further verses cited, and it goes further in regards to some incidents where these laws were actually taught. There are some other laws of purity discussed, and it speaks of a famous incident where there were 4 sages who entered the Garden of Eden. One sage, Elisha ben Avuya, who would come to be known as Acher, the other, was one of them. And he spoke to the angel Metatron, who records the merits of the Jewish people, and they had an argument, as Metatron was sitting, so they fought. And the voice said that he had lost his portion in the world to come. There's a lot of commentary as to what's going on with this story, as to what it means, but anyways, after this, Elisha decided to go become a heretic, so he paid for a harlot on Shabbos, and she asked, "Aren't you that sage?" So he uprooted a radish, which is forbidden on Shabbos, and she said, "Oh, you must be some other," hence the name Acher. Anyways, there are other points on this guy's teachings. There are points on his death and on his descendants, and that he was studying heretical tracts even before the whole heaven incident, along with other points. Rabbi Akiva was one of those who went to the Garden of Eden, and he survived, even though the angels wanted to push him away. It also says that demons are like angels in 3 ways. They have wings, they fly across the world, and they know the future, as they listen behind the curtain. Demons are like humans in that they eat and drink and reproduce, and they die. Humans are like angels in that they have understanding, they walk upright, and they speak the holy tongue. Humans are like animals in that they eat, they reproduce, and they use the restroom. The remaining points are discussed. Some say someone who doesn't honor his creator refers to somebody who gazes at rainbows. Some say it's someone who sins in secret. There are further discussions on this. New Mishnah. There are many opinions as to whether or not you can perform the semicha, leaning on an animal offering on a holiday. The Gemara discusses these opinions. Beis Shammai says on a holiday you can bring but not lean on shalomim offerings, and you can't bring olah offerings. Beis Hillel says you can bring both and lean on both. If Shavuos falls out on a Friday, Beis Shammai says the holiday offering was slaughtered on Sunday, while Beis Hillel says that it can be done on the holiday unless it's on Shabbos, in which case it's done the day after. On such a day, the Kohen Gadol wears ordinary clothes, and people are allowed to eulogize and fast, to not give credence to the Sadducee heretics who said Shavuos was always on a Sunday. The Gemara brings sources for these points, which are discussed. These laws are further qualified, and there are some additional points. New Mishnah. It defines all the different levels of consecrated produce, which are these, and the purification requirements before handling them. The Gemara goes through all of them. The different levels of immersion are qualified. There's additional discussion and some further points. And it lists some final explanation on the particular laws of different types of consecrated produce in regards to the purification requirements. And that's the end of chapter 2. Chapter 3, the final chapter of Tractate Chagigah, continues discussing the different levels of restrictions in regards to the laws of purity by specific consecrated produce. The first Mishnah is a list of stringencies of Kodesh, sacrificial food, over Terumah, the crop tithe given to the Kohanim, in that Terumah can have its vessels immersed within other vessels, but not Kodesh. Also, the outside, inside, and Sevita place, which will be defined, of vessels by Terumah are considered to be separate vessels. Also, someone carrying a midras, an item used to support the weight of a person with specific forms of impurity, can also carry Terumah, but not Kodesh. Also, the garments of someone who eats Terumah are considered like midras for somebody who eats Kodesh by immersing vessels by Kodesh. You need to make sure there's no interpositions by untying knots, drying it, and then immersing it. By Terumah, the vessel's knots can still be tied. Vessels that were created pure still must be immersed by Kodesh, but not Terumah. A vessel combines what's within it by Kodesh, but not with Terumah. With regards to contamination, it's lessened by each transmission. Kodesh says that the 4th transmission is still unfit, while by Terumah it's the 3rd. By Terumah, if one of your hands is impure, then that's it. By Kodesh, both of your hands must still be immersed. You can eat dry foods with impure hands by Terumah, but not by Kodesh. A mourner and an unatoned individual must immerse for Kodesh, but not for Terumah. The Gemara explains, by Kodesh you can't immerse a vessel inside of a vessel, as the weight creates an interposition. It also needs to teach a knot, to say that also causes an interposition even though there's no weight. It also says that the first 5 of those stringencies also apply by unconsecrated produce that were made pure. Like Kodesh, the last 5 do not. This is because the first 5 have concerns of biblical law, while the last 5 deal with rabbinic concerns. Others disagree. There's further discussion on immersing vessels within vessels. There are further points. We also said by Terumah, the outside, inside, and Sevita, which is defined as a handle according to some, and according to others it was a cavity used for dipping, which is considered as a separate part. This is discussed. There are further points on these laws of purity. This goes further. There's additional discussion in regards to particulars by utensils, along with some additional explanation. New Mishnah, there are some stringencies the opposite way, of Terumah over Kodesh. In Judea, they trusted ignorant individuals in regards to purity of sacrificial wine and oil, and specifically during the wine and oil pressing season, they were trusted with the purity of Terumah also. So, if it's not during this season, a Kohen can't accept a barrel of Terumah wine from them, but it can be set aside to be given by the next wine pressing season. He can give a barrel of wine for Kodesh, however. If there's jugs of oil or wine with mixed Terumah, unconsecrated produce, and Kodesh, ignorant individuals are trusted regarding their purity during the wine and oil pressing season, and 70 days before the wine pressing season. The Gemara said this applies in Judea, but not in Galilee, as there was a strip of Kuthian land in between. This is discussed. The remaining laws are also qualified, and there are further points. New Mishnah. Another way Teruma is stricter than Kodesh. From the town of Modim inwards to Jerusalem, ignorant people are trusted regarding the purity of earthenware utensils, but not from Modim outwards. Meaning, if a potter entered inward of Modim, he's trusted with this, otherwise he's not. The Gemara asks, what about within Modim itself? It says, if the potter is going from inward to Modim and the buyer from outside, it's regarded as inward, and if they're both coming from outside or from inside, it's considered like the outward area. We bring proofs, and therefore the points discussed. New Mishnah. More stringencies of Teruma over Kodesh. Tax agents or thieves who are returning what they stole are trusted by Kodesh only to say they didn't touch anything regarding the laws of purity. In Jerusalem, ignorant people are trusted only by Kodesh, although we trust them by Teruma, also by festivals. The Gemara discusses these points, along with some sources for these laws. New Mishnah, if someone opens a barrel of wine or starts selling a new batch of dough on a holiday and there's leftovers, there's debate if he can still sell it afterwards due to concerns of impurity contractions. The Gemara debates if he can save it to the next holiday based on the source, and implies he doesn't need to, he can just sell it immediately, like one of the opinions. New Mishnah, after a holiday, the temple vessels are removed for the purification in the courtyard. If the holiday ends going into a Shabbos, they would do it on that day to honor the Shabbos. Some add they wouldn't do it on Thursday as they're busy. The Gemara explains that they're busy taking out the ashes from the holiday offerings. New Mishnah. The vessels immersed from the courtyard by the temple are the ones that were in the temple over the holiday. During the holiday, they would make sure to not touch the table, which can't be immersed after the holiday. There were second and third replacement sets for all of the vessels in cases of impurity. Everything needed to be immersed in the temple after the holiday, besides for the gold and copper altars, as they're like earth and don't get impure. Others say it was because they were plated. The Gemara says in addition to the table, they couldn't touch the menorah. That's just not mentioned, as it could be moved and immersed. There's discussion on verses and on these points. This goes further. It discusses why plating would prevent impurity by the altars, and it says another point that the fire of Gehenna doesn't affect Torah scholars, as learned from the salamander, a strange creature which comes from a fire which burnt for 7 years, and if you put its blood on you, you'll be fireproof. So how much more so the Torah scholars who won't be affected by fire as they're made of fire, based on the verse. Similarly, according to others, even the sinners will not be affected by the fires of Gehenna as learned from the altar, which was thinly gold-plated and fire didn't affect it. So for sure, fire won't affect the sinners, who are still so full of mitzvahs they're compared to a pomegranate, based on a verse. And that's the end of chapter 3 and the entire Tractate Chagigah. Alright, that was a lot of information. So here's a rough summary of a lot of the practical takeaways from the Tractate. The Chagigah offering was an offering brought on holidays. When the temple stands during the 3 pilgrimage holidays of Passover, Shavuos, and Sukkot, everyone travels down to Jerusalem to bring the special Chagigah holiday offering in the temple. And that's about everything. Thank you so much for watching.